I'm of the opinion that you have to kind of balance it. So find some stuff. You can use research to kind of like find things you're interested in, or in my case, find a lot of things you're not interested in and rule them out. But at the same time, you get the experience of doing research and getting published along the way. So there's pros and cons to it. Some people will say take a year off. Some people like me will say I definitely don't want to take a year off. I just want to get stuff along the way. So there's like tricks of the trade for whatever your mindset is, and you just kind of have to figure out what you want to do and then just pick it up along the way.
So my name's Tyler. I'm a fourth year. I think I already said that. Sorry. So basically, I wasn't sure if I wanted to be a doctor, but once I decided I wanted to be a doctor, I knew exactly what I wanted to do. I wanted to do cardiology. So when I came to Baylor, I basically emailed the chief of cardiology, Dr. Valentine, and said like, hey, I'm a medical student. I want to do research. Will you meet with me? And he was actually very nice to meet with me. He has a whole research section at Baylor and Methodist. It's one of like the last like vestiges of the Baylor Methodist relationship, and they do cardiovascular imaging research and preventative cardiology. And he had he was a internal medicine resident at that point, but he was doing something called an American Board of Internal Medicine research pathway, which is basically where you do internal medicine residency and then several years of research afterwards. And so he was someone doing research full time. And so this guy, he basically set me up with that resident who was doing research full time, and I basically just did research with him. And my projects really centered around cardiovascular imaging and atherosclerotic disease. And then also I did a project with him where I basically created my own prospective study. I submitted an IRB application, I enrolled patients, I would take students who I got to volunteer to Ben Taub on Saturday mornings, and I would do a study where I would measure different vascular parameters on them and scan the carotid arteries with an ultrasound after they ate a predetermined fat load, which consisted of one of those breakfast sandwiches from McDonald's. So that took a while, and I completed that. But while I was doing that, I would do other projects, and they've been really, really good about getting me publications. So from that lab, I've gotten 13 publications since I started my first year of medical school. So I guess from my experience, the one thing I would say is that you really have to do research in something you're interested in. It doesn't necessarily have to be what you ultimately go into, but if you're interested in it, you'll be more likely to actually sit down and do the research while you're busy with your preclinicals or clinical rotations. And then also, I got lucky in that the first people I found were really, really good, but I've heard a lot of horror stories from other people who have done research where people basically just scut them out, doing chart reviews that they don't want to do, and then they make them third or fourth author on a paper and they don't get much out of it. The people I was with were very, very adamant about getting me publications, getting me to present at national meetings, and really did their best to get me as many high-quality publications as I could. And so that's one thing I would tell you is look around and see who has the time to take you on as a mentee, meet with you, and make sure you get publications out of your time. Because if you don't publish, it's like you didn't do it when you apply for residency.
So I'm Xander. I was one of these people that was sort of wondering whether I should have done an MD PhD or not when I applied, and I ultimately decided not to apply to that program because I value my 20s. But I was still very interested in basic science and research. When I got to Baylor, I found out that there's this program here, MSRT, it's a track, I guess, technically, but it's a small program. It's what Jason was referring to earlier. It's a couple students a year, essentially, that choose to take a year off and do a mini PhD, essentially. You don't get a degree, but you spend a year as a basic scientist graduate student, in essence. You're not really allowed to do any clinical work with this, although Miss Alfred's not here. But one student has gone through this particular program and done kind of a more clinical thing, but the program is intended for basic science for the most part. So I approached a scientist here at Baylor named Huda Zaghi, who studies the brain. She studies the genetics of many diseases that affect the brain. She's a big-time basic scientist here at Baylor. Howard Hughes investigator, famous National Academy of Science member. I approached someone who was very famous, very specifically, because they were famous, in a sense. I was interested in their research, but I needed to be in a lab where the prestige of simply being in the lab and having a letter from that scientist would be enough. Because 1 year in basic science is not very much time. The odds of you getting a first author publication in a single year are very, very low. And so you have to be able to fall back on the possibility that you don't get a first author publication. Maybe you're like third or fourth author on a couple little things. but you have a letter from a prominent person that can mean something. As sad as it is, you have to kind of focus on the career implications of your research. So for the last 12 months, that's what I've been doing. I was essentially treated as a first-year grad student in all respects, except that I didn't have to go to classes or take tests or anything like that. I just worked in the lab. I did bench work. I think I'd like to echo what Tyler said. Don't get sucked into being the PCR biatch for some lab. Don't just be the one pulling case files. You guys are all pretty talented. You got here. You're worth more than that. There are going to be people out there that are going to take advantage of the fact that you want something on your CV. So shop around, talk to other people in that environment, in that group, in that lab, see what the environment's like. You're going to be spending all your time there. If you're going to do something that's intensive as a full year. I wrote a silly little list, somewhat in order of the amount of work you put in for different research opportunities. Something can be as simple as a weekend spent writing a case report on a single patient. It's not going to get published in the New England Journal of Medicine, but it's a little something. You can write it on your CV. It's minimal input, minimal output. Then there's, on the other end, there's MD PhD, the ultimate. It can take 6 years of extra time, but you're a PhD, you have multiple publications. It's sort of crazy. Don't do it. And there's everything in between, right? So it's like, what do you want to get out of it? Do you see yourself having a lab in the future or not? Is this just something you want to get into a better residency with? Maybe do a little bit less effort? Your time is worth a lot right now, so you really have to kind of balance what you think you want to do. I'm a little sad that I spent an extra year. I'm happy to join the MSW class, of course, but all of my friends are about to be doctors in less than a year, and I'm not. So that's sort of value your time strongly.
Yeah, can I add one thing about time commitments? Like, your time in medical school is very valuable, and you have to like always put your grades and your clinical skills first. So one of the things when you're shopping around is a lot of people will want to set hard deadlines, like I need these cases reviewed and this written up by this date. And so one of the things I would advise you is try to find someone who's flexible, who will allow you to work when you have free time. Because you'll find it very, very difficult, actually exceedingly difficult, to meet hard deadlines like that. There was actually another group of people I wanted to do research with, but they essentially wanted me to do work that would have taken a full month of working 12 hours a day in less than 3 weeks. And I was just like, I'm on rotations, there's no way I can do this. And so I had to decommit from that.
Don't overburden yourself. Do not compromise your clinical responsibilities. Do not compromise your basic science responsibilities. That's your number one priority.
That's 80-90% of the game.
If you have extra time, you're the type of person that studies a little faster, you find yourself with empty time, and the city somehow does not fill it with all the joyous offerings of cultural whatever. Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt. While we're like on this topic, do you guys do, and this is for anybody, do you guys do other extracurriculars in addition to your research, or do you find research being the big other thing that you do?
I do tons of other stuff.
We barbecue a lot.
Well, it's like Xander said, like there's like the spectrum of what you can do. Like most of the stuff I've gotten involved with is like case reports or retrospective studies. So it's kind of like all self-paced, again about the deadlines thing. But if you want to take like a year off and work in like a really fancy lab or not take a year off but still work in a fancy lab, it might not be as feasible. But I really spend minimal time on research.
I'm involved in a lot of other things. Like I am the president of Doctors for Change. I do a lot of like healthcare policy stuff. I've had to kind of like change how I do that. Like in the beginning I was doing like more research and less policy stuff, and I've kind of done more policy stuff and less research as I've progressed throughout medical school. But yeah, it's just about good time management, being efficient.
So that's one advantage I would say of the year off, is that like I was a full-time scientist. I got a salary from Howard Hughes. It was my job. I had no clinical responsibilities. I had no medical responsibilities whatsoever. I left med school completely. And so science became what I would have been doing in medicine. So whatever extra stuff I was doing normally, I can continue to do, per se. And scientific schedule is extremely flexible usually. My boss is the kind of person that only cared about, give me the data. I don't care if I never see you and you only come in at 3 in the morning and do your experiments, but at the end of the week, as long as I see the data, That's all that matters. You can find a situation that really fits your particular lifestyle, your time commitments, etc.
I can also add into that. So last year I was very much involved with extracurriculars. I started the 5K, which hopefully you guys are all signed up for, the Wellness 5K at Baylor. That was a huge time commitment. But at the same time, and I'm not sure this has been mentioned yet, something that's a possibility once you enter clinical rotations is to use some of the months that sometimes end up in your schedule sort of as a gap between when you have like 3 months rotations or 2-month rotations. You can use one of those months actually and just devote it to research. And so that's been my experience. I worked in a lab for 1 month. But so I would say don't think that getting into research means that you don't have the option to get really involved in student clubs, because that's very valuable. Actually, this club was started last year by Christy Hamilton, who's now the president of the Medical Student Council. So I think it really goes to show that you can still do both. Sorry to interrupt.
Oh, it's all good. Yeah, so I'm much more of a research on the side person. I just wrote up a case report, and then I've been involved in this other research study for a while. I think the end of first year actually was the first time I got involved. I was shadowing in neurology, and I spoke to this resident. I heard about this incredible PD neuroradiologist. Her name is Jill Hunter, and she works with the NIH constantly, and she travels all over the world, and everything she writes gets published. She is, she was who I really wanted to work with. And I learned about a study looking at DTIs, diffuse tensor imaging, and looking at crossing over of the corpus callosum in children with developmental delays. So, children who present to the disabilities clinic. So actually I recruited Jen because there were all these charts that I had to review, and we actually talked about how we had the same month off. The project itself, the charts are really, really interesting. So chart review goes quickly. We have had some very serious administrative hurdles though with our project. And we've had some pretty serious delays. So I'm glad I got started early because it looks like we're going to be done and have a publication certainly by, I would say February at the latest. We'll have something written and submitted. But I kind of feel like I lucked out with meeting her. And the thing that I really looked for was that she said, I want to get you published. I want to make sure you get something good out of this. I plan on writing you a letter. And so that was really encouraging, and that's what I was looking for. And it's been, the time commitment hasn't been that bad. I did a month in clinical, and then I did like little bits here and there in preclinical. And I do lots of other stuff, like I have a weekly commitment that I do at a halfway house, and I've heard of DFC now, and I'm married, so I have 2 dogs. Like, I do lots of other stuff, and but I don't want to work in a lab. So yeah, and the case report I just wrote up, and I've learned how easy those are. So it's my experience.
So I'm Jen again, and I guess some of you guys, I read all the questions you guys wrote on your surveys to RSVP for the meeting, and some people just said like, should I even do research? That was one of the questions that came up several times. And I actually, I told you already I have a background doing some research in engineering stuff, and I did a little bit of medical research before med school. But I asked my quad mentor in one of our first meetings, my first semester, like, hey, should I be doing research? Like, how should I spend my extracurricular time? I think I want to do pediatrics. I know that's not like the most competitive specialty. And he looked at my resume and he was like, no, you don't worry about doing research. Just don't worry about it. Pediatrics, you don't really need it. And so I just, first year and a half of med school, I just focused on my like preclinical curriculum, and I didn't even think about it. And so I think if you're sitting here going like, I don't like research and I'm not going to go into that competitive specialty, I already know, then I would just say like, don't worry about it. Like, spend your time doing fun things like the 5K and like extracurriculars you really love and care about, and volunteering and service and everything, and start a new club or something. You know, just do things you enjoy, but don't worry about it. On the other hand, if you're sitting here going like, you know, I don't, know what I want to go into, maybe research is a way to explore that. Maybe research is, but also like shadowing opportunities is another way to explore that, and through shadowing you might find a research mentor. So, I mean, I wouldn't go into this saying like, I need 13 publications to do a specialty, like to get into any residency. Like, that's not necessarily, like, don't sit here and panic and be anxious. Just that encouragement. And I actually ended up missing research. Even though I don't maybe need it for residency, I like missed it. I thought it, like after a year and a half, I was like, well, I kind of want to do something again. And so then Juliet and I were talking about our clinical schedules. We found out we had both a month off, and she said, hey, do you want to join my research project? And I said, yes. And so, it's a match made in heaven, no. But it was just that easy, like honestly, just that kind of networking, just talking to your classmates as you normally would, and you know, talking to the faculty member who agreed there was enough work for both of us, and so we got on the project together. And then that's a records review project, so you can see where it is on the spectrum of amount of work. You know, it's kind of lower on the spectrum. It's nice, you can do it in your own time. We had a really relaxing month of research. Yeah. It was really fun. And I'm starting actually another research project with, the way I found that mentor was he's been like one of the faculty sponsors for one of the clubs I've been involved in since first year. And so we've developed a relationship through the club. And now that I'm in my third year, I actually got to work with him on one of my clinical rotations, and now he's kind of said, hey, I want to help you to get a publication for residency so you can be more competitive and have more of your choice of places and stuff like that. So I think another person asked, how can I tactfully bring up that I want a publication? I think that was a question that came up a few times. And I think that's just like, like we've already said, a lot of mentors know that. They know you need that. It's not like something you have to hide. Just be like, hey, this is one of my goals. And literally up front, this mentor said, find what conference you want to publish at. Like, find the due date, and we'll make sure it's done before this due date. And so then you can go and have like a conference presentation or poster publication presentation like this coming spring. Because he knows residency applications are coming. So like, they know in their head, like they've been in your shoes and they know what you're looking for. They know what you need to get into a competitive residency and so on. So I wouldn't be shy about it if that really is one of your goals.
You also get free trips out of this.
Yeah.
Well, I would like to add something to that. So I initially thought I wanted to do pediatric surgery, and I spoke with somebody I know outside of medical school that's a pediatric surgeon, and he said, well, given like the current climate of pediatric surgery, if you want to do it, you need to like start doing stuff now. And it wasn't so much I needed a bunch of publications, but he was like, the community's so small, you need to get out and meet people. He was like, so he was the one that told me to go meet with the pediatric surgeons here and say, hey, I want to be a pediatric surgeon, do you have anything I can work on? And then to kind of start meeting and mingling, like you guys all have lectures with Alatoy and Brandt, but then to like work in their office and to help work on a project that they're an author on, they get to know you better, and then you get to know the people in Dallas and the people in other places. So a lot of this is also, while a lot of this is about getting published so you can put something on your CV, a lot of it also is getting to know people in the field that you think you might want to go into. Because at the end of the day, the people who make the decisions, like who are we going to take into our program, like they can look at your CV or they can say, oh, I know this guy. Like I don't need to see a CV. Like I want him to come to our program. So that's also something else to keep in mind, to use this as an opportunity to meet people in the field that you're interested in doing.
It's entirely possible that I walk away from this not having a single publication. I'm trying really hard, but it might not happen, and that's okay because of the people that I've met and because of the associations that I've developed, that I'm a student of so-and-so and that I've met so-and-so. The networking opportunities in the numerous conferences that happen every week, and the funding available for you guys to go present a poster or go present an abstract somewhere, that's almost as good as the research and publication itself, if not better in some cases.
I actually wanted to make another plug for other types of publications. I was reading a New England Journal of Medicine article written by a guy over at Methodist on an issue that's more of like an immigrant health issue that I feel really connected to. And I actually wrote him and I said, hey, like, are there any projects I could get involved in? And I'm working on a publication with him now with a couple of journals in mind that's more of like a student op-ed piece. So I think like there are other ways also to get publications. And certainly finding something you find really interesting. Like with our thing, I was like, yes, I want to look at like crazy DTIs and see what's like going on in this new field. And then this project I feel really excited to work on. So I feel like just echoing what other people have said, find something that's really interesting to you, so it just feels like another great addition to your life.
And don't be intimidated by, trying to contact someone who's very well renowned within the medical center. Like, people are usually very receptive to medical students contacting them, and they're more than happy to
flatters of you.
Yeah, they're more than happy to meet with you, and if they can't meet with you, like, the person who handles their research will meet with you. And so it's amazing as you go through medical school. One thing I found, it's amazing what you can get if you just ask for it.
And also, I think another thing to add is sometimes these guys are really, really busy. And so you might send an email out and say, oh, I want to do research with you. Do you have any opportunities? And then you don't hear anything. And so I wouldn't stop there. You can contact their secretary, say, hey, can I schedule a meeting to meet with this guy?
Yeah.
I've done that, and they're very receptive to that. They have office hours. They'll sit down with you, and they'll talk about what kind of projects they have. If you like it, awesome. See if they're willing to take you on. If you're like, this isn't really for me, say, I don't know if this is a good fit, and that's okay too.
Every single researcher in the medical center, from clinical to translational to basic, has stuff sitting on the shelf that they have been meaning to get around to, and they just haven't had the manpower, and it hasn't been on their radar. It's sitting there, waiting to be done, almost prepackaged. The project that I walked into was 50% completed, and they didn't have a new grad student. The new grad student they hired decided to work on something else. The thing was just sitting there. The mice were sitting there. All the reagents were sitting there. And it wasn't just that I turned the crank, but it was ready to go, shovel-ready project, essentially.
So that's what you're looking for. I wouldn't say everybody has that, but I guess that's the kind of mentor that you want to find, because they have the resources to do it, they have the guidance to get it done.
And if you're not doing an MSRT, they don't really have to pay you, so you're kind of working for free, which they love.
Well, even MSRT, there's outside funding.
Yeah.
My boss doesn't pay me. The outside organization pays my salary.
But to do the MSRT, you have to get funded somehow, right?
Yeah, so you have to have funding from either your mentor or outside funding, and it has to be like $23,000 a year.
Feel free to shop around also, to meet with somebody and figure out what kind of research. I mean, clearly don't commit to something and then back out, but saying, I just want to hear about what you have available. Yeah, don't do that. I want to hear about what you have available. I only have a limited amount of time, and I just wanted to learn more about the research going on in your field. And get a feel for whether they seem like supportive mentors.
What's up?
Where did you get the outside funding for the MSRT? Just
The way that Dr. Brendan Lee is the guy who runs MSRT, he started it here. The ideal way to do it is to get it through the Howard Hughes Med Fellows program, which is what they prefer.
Who's from Houston?
Who's originally from Houston. I don't know if you guys have heard of Howard Hughes Medical Institute, but it's a large nonprofit sort of private organization that funds a ton of research. They have billions of dollars in endowment. They just hand out money to people to do science, essentially. They have a program specifically for it's medical, dental, and veterinary students, but it's mostly medical students. They fund about 80 people a year, 40 grand to do science, to take a year off of med school, kind of do exactly what MSRT is. But if you don't get that funding, there are alternatives. Some labs have internal money to pay you.
Most students who do the MSRT are not funded through HHMI, right?
I would say the majority.
Is it the majority?
I don't know.
The guy who just started, the MS3 who just started got it.
Okay.
I got it last year. I was the only one last year, I guess. But
So if you want to get that, you want to go to a big established lab like that.
I went to a Howard Hughes lab.
You go to
So
a
my
lab
boss
that-
was Howard Hughes, and I asked Howard Hughes for money, and it kind of just made
You're like,
sense.
oh, okay. But you also want to start that process really early, because the submission deadline is in December, I believe, of the year before.
Yeah.
So if you're like, oh, I'm kind of thinking about doing MSRT next year, oh, it's October, it's November, oh, it's too late now, because you have to really get the ball rolling. It's a big grant submission.
Yeah,
So-
there's like these nights, so MSRT, the track thing was today, right? Introducing you guys to the tracks? No? Blank stares. Yesterday?
So there's like an elective you can take where like Brendan Lee will basically bring in people to talk about their research, and you stay at 6 p.m. on Wednesday nights, and you basically just listen to a presentation. It's for you to learn about different researchers in the medical center. And usually the people who take that elective I don't know,
Some will-
some will opt
maybe
to
like
go
a
on and
fourth,
do the
a
MS,
third.
do the MSRT, and like throughout that elective, he kind of tells you about the process of applying for Howard Hughes Medical Institute.
Did you guys hear about MSRT in the track thing? Does it sound, do they change everything, or is that about what?
Is Frank still here?
It's been a few years. Okay.
I've also heard from people who didn't end up doing the MSRT that elective is actually really good for just research skills in general. So
And just
even if,
meeting people.
Yeah.
yeah.
I would just go to those Tuesday nights.
Free store pizza.
Free start.
Yeah, I went, the pizza was good, and I realized I did not want to do basic science research. And so it kind of showed me like what I was interested in by showing me what I didn't want to do.
So you have to write a project proposal
Oh,
in
yeah.
December?
Yeah.
Like a full.
Full,
Yeah,
it's like a
How much would it have
grant.
to be?
It's a grant proposal, basically. So you write up, I mean, I didn't, the project from me personally was sitting there, as I said, so I sat with my professor and a postdoc, a grad student, we went through it, and it's kind of like applying to med school again. I mean, they want all your grades, they want your MCAT scores, they want all that nonsense, letters of recommendation, and then they want a project proposal with aims, specific aims, background, expected results. It's almost like writing a R01 for the NIH.
But usually someone in the lab will help.
They'll help you,
Yeah,
you don't do it yourself.
The grant writing is an art all in of itself.
Hey y'all, I have to leave early. This is my email address and my phone number. Text me or email me. I'd love to talk to you guys about getting involved. All right.
I think one additional point with that is the difference between basic science and clinical research. The bottom three things on that list are clinical. So just like heads up, clinical research is a very broad term and encompasses like case reports, case series. Review basically means records review, which is something if you are doing it at a center with Epic, you can do it from home or remotely. So it's a lot less time commitment and it's a lot more flexibility, as Tim's already said and other guys said. Basic science basically means you're in a lab, like working with mice or
Yeah.
chemicals or all those
Flies.
kind of things. Those projects are like a time commitment because
Yeah.
you can't predict the outcomes, you have to be physically in the place. It's kind of like, it takes a long time to get results and I think like if you do a month of research like I did in your clinical years, like I would not expect to go in there, especially if it's not an established project, and get results from a basic science project in
Don't.
like a month.
I can actually weigh in on that because that's what I did.
Don't do that.
And to also weigh in on the point of making sure you know like where your project is along that timeline of is it 50% complete or not. So I went in and we had a new project to do for 1 month. And I have no regrets because it was actually, I learned a lot in the lab and I had a good time, but like the IRB that I was doing the project on actually wasn't even approved by the time I got there. So that didn't really work out. I worked on the other project, but I had wanted to go in there and it was maybe kind of a pipe dream. Just try to get some research in 4 weeks and magically do a paper in the next month. And that was all on a timeline that only existed in my own head. So definitely something to consider when you have a very short amount of time, because we were talking about the possibility of, going into the lab later on during clinics, and like honestly that was not really a time commitment that I was able to make during clinics. So just something to consider.
When you go from free clinics to clinics, your free time goes like,
Way down. You think it's hard now, it's not. It's super easy
Which is
now.
different.
I would also say, like, maybe take advantage of the fact that you guys have really flexible schedules in your
Yeah.
preclinical years to try out some of the things that some different departments offer. For instance, I was potentially interested in doing some surgery research, and so I reached out to one of those secretaries, and she told me the schedule for their weekly meeting with like all of their hotshots surgery researchers, where they all go and they talk about the abstracts that they're working on. And that's the sort of thing that like now that I'm in clinics, it's like at 8 o'clock in the weekdays. Like I can't make that anymore without awkwardly trying to step out. But if you were potentially trying on different things besides or just want to make your face known in a particular field, that's definitely something to look into. And I'm trying to collect some of the departmental research coordinator emails, and so that's something that's hopefully we'll be able to put on the website once we collect more of those.
Another thing, if you're interested in clinical research, I forgot to bring this up. So there are VPNs and remote access for a lot of the electronic medical record systems at like TCH and Dentab. And so what you can do is you can sit at home and do chart reviews like in your underwear at like 9:30 at night when you're just like tired of studying. So that was another way I made like my research like very flexible. I wouldn't, and it was really nice because it allowed me to get work done in like little chunks. You know, I had an hour here, an hour and a half there, 2 hours here, and so that's something to consider if like the lab you're working in allows for that. I know. One of the labs I was going to work in, actually the one I had to decommit from, like they're like, no, you must be physically in this building. You can't take anything out of here. You're not allowed to do any research outside of this hospital.
Was that the VA?
No.
Really?
So yeah,
VA's
The VA is very draconian about that, but it was not the VA.
Do not do basic research if you did not have extensive experience already. You cannot go into a lab and learn PCR and learn Western blots and learn how to work with lines. I've been there 12 months and I have a lot of background in basic science, and it still took me 2.5 months to get on my feet and just know everything else, be comfortable before I really started working. So if you're going to do something small, it's got to be clinical. And that's kind of more medical anyway, right? Like my work, there's not even a human disease attached to the project that I did. So it's like as far from clinical science as you could possibly get. But I had an interest in it. The vast majority of you guys should pursue something manageable, clinical. It's going to get your name on a couple of things, get you some face time with some big name doctors, and not take too much time away from you. Yeah.
Okay, so I have not done research at all, and I'm not interested in basic science research, but I am interested in clinical research. And I was just wondering if, like, with the month rotations, like, do you know people who also take a month rotation abroad, like, help with on-the-ground research, like, I don't know, in Africa, looking after stuff? And, like, so I guess my question is like, have enough time? Like, I know basic science, it's not, but if you only have a month and you're doing clinical research, is that enough to like do it and then like continue working with them after?
Baylor's cool because we only have 18 months of preclinical, right? So we actually have more free time as med students than many other med schools. So there's actually a remarkable amount of time that you can take off. If you do some electives now, like preclinical, so that you don't have to do so many later on during clinical. Oh, that doesn't exist anymore? Everything changes every, yeah, you guys got
So what's the
iPads.
incentive?
Yeah, it's
There's like
you guys
water
thought about it.
fountain things now.
Have you been in the anatomy lab
I
yet?
think you would,
They took the
if
carpet
you
out.
had
know.
it planned out ahead of time,
Yeah.
and you were really
Hard to
clear on what your population was, what your inclusion criteria was, what you're looking for, you had a faculty who's willing to support you. Like, I think it would be enough time to collect data, having it planned out. I think a month would be enough time to collect and like, preliminary. I don't know, do you guys?
I'm glad you brought that question up because it made me like think of something. So I just started, or I haven't started yet, but I was sitting around thinking about all the projects that I was working on that I'm not really interested in anymore. And I was like, what do I really want to do with myself at this point? And I was like, I want to do something with space and eyeballs. So then I was like, who do I know that's involved in like space or eyeballs? And so I found this guy, Dr. Lee, that works at Methodist. He's a neuro-ophthalmologist. And I said, hey, in so many words, I want to do space and eyeballs. And so he was like, well, I know this astronaut and I know this other guy. And so he set me up with 3 emails like instantly, or he emailed these 3 bigwigs instantly and was like, hey, I got this student Tim here. He's a 3rd year. He's a great guy. He's the best guy ever. Can you do something with him? And so, but because I just like thought, what do I want to do? What's crazy and out there? It probably exists in the Houston Medical Center. You'll find some person and then they'll set you up with somebody who's doing something. So I'm going to work on this crazy like eyeball, brainwave, space thing. I don't really understand it. But I'm going to take a month off next spring and just go work in this guy's lab. Like I met with him, he was like, yeah, I got a place for you. Let's say you come in April and we'll make you, you know, an author on this thing we're doing that's like, we're the only place in the world that's doing it, and they're going to use it in space. So, you know, like, those opportunities are out there. So, like, think, like, I want to do something clinical in Africa, and then just kind of ask around, like, ask Frank Kretzer, he knows everybody. And then he'll, like, tell you a name of somebody, you go talk to that person, and then if they don't help you, they'll probably put you in touch with somebody who can sign you up for a month in Africa, or 3 or 4 months, somewhere where you're doing something weird.
We just started the tropical medicine school here. So that's
Okay.
sort of right up your alley.
There's the Baylor Pediatric AIDS Initiative in Botswana
I'm
too.
loving
Yeah,
Can be like
it's custom for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if you're also interested in international health, they do something in Peru, right? There's like a leper colony.
It's shoulder to shoulder?
Yeah. It's
That's
like,
in
I don't,
Honduras.
that's Honduras.
okay, no, but there's something in Peru. There's something
Really?
Yeah.
We're all over the map, guys.
There's a lot of opportunity, just be persistent, like check out everything, and if you get a dead end, just keep going.
Send 20 emails tomorrow.
Ask your upperclassmen.
All they can
We
say is
always
no.
have answers.
I have a question. So everybody like gets a month off during their clinical rotations at some point, right? Like everybody will have free time.
I've been off for like 3 months.
You get
because
like,
everyone's
you have like
scheduling
6
their rotations,
months
so-
off or
And then
something,
is
you'll
there
take
someone
step
to
with some of
expect
it.
to get like multiple publications from like a 1 month or
No.
2 month break
If you,
from-
remember earlier I said you do something like overnight over the weekend and then somebody sits on it for months at a time. So a good idea is if you're interested to start asking around now, because the things that you start now probably won't be rolling for a long time. Because like things don't, even though you can do all the work like in a week, for a lot of this clinical stuff, it just doesn't happen in a week. Because there's too many people involved in too many places.
That's one of the reasons I told you guys, when you're shopping around, ask about availability. Like I had a fellow who just did research all the time. He was always available. I knew exactly where he would be. I could call him. Some of the attendings, like you may send an email, like Jason says, you may never hear back. You may hear back 5 weeks later. He may be able to meet with you like 6 weeks from now. You're like, but I have free time now, but I don't know what to do. Help me.
Just remember, some of these projects have been sitting on their shelves for like a long time. Maybe it's in their head or it started a little bit, and you email them, you're all excited. To them, it's still on the shelf. Okay, we'll get it going, They've been saying that for months already.
Like they won't
so-
remember your name the next time.
Along those lines, I mean, take advantage of the internet, right? Like you can PubMed any of these people. Are they putting out one paper every 3 years, or are they churning it out? You can get an idea of the throughput of a particular researcher pretty quickly using all the scholarly resources that we have online. And you're gonna wanna tie yourself to someone that is very consistently publishing and, looks like there's a lot of authors on stuff, so you could sneak in somewhere.
Or start with Dr. Brandt. Like Dr. Brandt generally is a good pointer of who to go talk to. I've gone to her with random questions and she's like, oh yeah, talk to this lady at TCH, she knows everything about that. Or let me call my friend for you real fast, like while you're in her office. So she's a good resource to start with as well.
You shouldn't all email her right now.
She's open office hours on Fridays.
Yeah.
Or
Just
whatever
all
Pamela
around.
3
says.
to 5.
Yeah.
So kind of to add what Xander was saying, some of these guys are really churning it out, pumping it out. Put yourself out there, get a project. If you realize this, this is not the kind of place that I'm going to be able to crank them out, seek out something else. Find that one lab, that one guy that is just feeding you papers, and then once you find that, just ride it out.
Gravy train.
That's really what you're looking for.
I guess a bunch of people had asked about, like, doing research in an area they may not be interested in, or like changing interest areas, or like, I have no idea what I want to do, where I even start. I guess to address that set of questions, like I'm doing research right now on like some PD neuro stuff, and I'm tangentially interested in that, but primarily pediatrics. But I think there are so many transferable skills about research that it applies to no matter what you're going into. Like
And-
people will see the
And
evidence at work
programs when you apply for residency will give you credit for it, even if it's not in what you're applying to.
specifically.
Yeah, they
It's
just
something to talk about during the interview.
Yeah.
It's interesting about you. It'll draw their attention.
It shows them that you have, research interests and stuff like that.
And I would say if you're an MS1 and you literally have no idea about what you want to go into, I would personally delay going to looking for research for a few months and just spend time shadowing and just figuring that out a little bit more, narrowing it down at least to where I want to do medicine or surgery. Just like this is your first semester in med school, give yourself a break and just work on figuring out your interest a little bit before you commit to a big project.
Well, but I would
Because
disagree.
I talked to Dr. Brandt, she's like, no research yet.
Well,
Like, wait.
It's her job to say that.
Well, right, that's what I was thinking.
It's her job to make sure you guys make good grades.
Right.
And like we said, never compromise that. If it's compromising your grades, don't do it.
But take advantage of the fact that it's pass-fail.
It's not a bad
It's
time
not
to,
really pass fail.
it's not a bad time
It's
to
not
put your
passive.
feelers out there.
Frank will tell you it's not.
It's not a bad time to put your feelers out there, get some
Elementary
contacts, and
So I think we're gonna wrap up now. Thank you guys so much for coming out. I hope you picked up some little pearls of wisdom from this panel.
We'll put our email addresses on
Yeah,
the
and
board.
feel free to like stop us in the hall and stuff. We don't remember you. It's okay. Just remind us.
And if you haven't
It's not
done
okay.
the RSVP for
not
this,
okay.
please do, because we're gonna try to set up some mentorship program from that. Some of these lovely panelists have signed us some mentors, so look forward to that. Thank you guys.